Hey everyone, welcome back to Medieval Historian. Or if it's your first time here, strap in, because tonight we're heading into one of the most cursed jobs in medieval history. No, not being a peasant. Worse, this episode is all about the executioner, the one person paid to deliver justice with an axe and live in misery forever because of it. This video is going to pull back the hood, literally and figuratively, on what it really meant to be the guy swinging the sword. Spoiler, it wasn't glory, gold, or grim satisfaction. It was blood, isolation, and a job that stuck to you like the smell of death. Today, we complain about deadlines, emails, or our coffee being made wrong. But back then, your job might be cutting off a man's head while a crowd cheered, and then going home to a dinner you weren't even allowed to eat with the rest of town. Sounds like fun, right? So, before we begin, and before you get too comfortable, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next descent into the past. And tell me in the comments, what city and country are you watching from, and what time is it right now where you are? I'm just a nerd who loves digging into history's darkest corners, and it always blows my mind to see people tuning in from all over the world. You guys make this journey even more amazing. It's wild seeing this little channel reach so many different places, and I absolutely love having all of you along for the ride. Now, let's talk about the job nobody wanted, and the curse that came with it. Why being a medieval executioner was a cursed job. Let's be clear from the start, no one wanted to be the executioner. No little boy in medieval Europe looked up at the gallows and said, "Someday, I want to be the guy who cuts off heads for a living." Because the truth is, it wasn't a job you dreamed of. It was a job you ended up with, like a punishment wrapped in a paycheck, except the paycheck was mostly curses, social exile, and a house that no one wanted to walk past after dark. You were the instrument of justice, but also the town's walking nightmare. People needed you, but they'd never sit next to you in church. In theory, you were part of the law, employed, technically. Respected? Never. You delivered verdicts with your hands, your blade, and your complete lack of options. The executioner was part state servant, part butcher, and part outcast, tasked with carrying out the worst sentences the courts could dream up: hanging, beheading, burning, breaking, quartering, and sometimes all of the above. You didn't just kill. You performed death in front of crowds hungry for blood and spectacle. You weren't a man. You were a ritual. When someone was sentenced to die, you were summoned. Not by name, just by your role. People avoided saying your name. Superstition, mostly, but also fear. Saying the executioner's name aloud was like inviting death into your home. And so you became a myth while still breathing. An anonymous monster in human skin, summoned only when the people wanted vengeance dressed up as law. The irony, you didn't decide guilt or innocence. That was the judge's job. You just carried out the sentence. But the public didn't care. They saw you as the face of every execution. The hangman was the punishment. And while most feared you, some pitied you. Silently. Because everyone knew what the job did to a man. There was no coming back from it. Once you killed, you carried that stain forever. You could try to wash the blood from your hands, but the town wouldn't let you forget. Kids would whisper when you passed. Neighbors would nail charms above their doors. Priests would offer prayers when you left a room, not to you, for protection from you. Being a medieval executioner wasn't a career. It was a slow-motion exile wrapped in routine violence. You were the butcher of men and the scapegoat of their sins, and if you hoped for peace, comfort, or even a kind word, you wouldn't find it here. Welcome to the job. You're already cursed. You don't become an executioner without sacrificing something, and usually it starts with your name. The moment you take the job, your identity is severed along with the first neck. No one remembers who you were before. They only see what you are now. A killer in the name of the law. A living symbol of death. Your neighbors might once have called you by name, shared bread with you, maybe even smiled at you across the market. But the day you became the town's executioner, that all disappeared like smoke. You stopped being Thomas, or Peter, or Willem. You became the hangman, or worse, that thing. Your reputation didn't just die. It was buried in a shallow grave and spat on by everyone who walked past. Children were told not to look at you. Housewives crossed themselves when you entered the square. No matter how you spoke, how kind your eyes were, how quietly you moved through the village, you could not escape the invisible noose tied around your social standing. Because in the minds of everyone else, if you could cut off a man's head and not go mad, then there had to be something wrong with you. People whispered that you enjoyed it, that you laughed when the axe fell, that you made your stew with the bones of criminals. It wasn't true, but it didn't matter. Rumor had more power than truth, and you didn't get the luxury of defending yourself. You weren't allowed to join guilds. You couldn't eat with townsfolk. Even your coins were sometimes refused by merchants too scared to touch the silver you'd been paid with. You were stained, not with blood, but with fear. And if you ever tried to hide what you were, if you moved to another town, tried to start over, they'd find out. Word traveled, faster than wagons, faster than plague. He used to be the executioner, they'd whisper. Don't buy from him, don't speak to him, don't even look at him. There was no escape. Only the mask, the axe, and the empty seat at every tavern table. Some say reputation is everything. In your case, it was the first casualty. Long before the rope tightened or the blade swung, your standing in the world was already gone. You were no longer part of society. You were its warning. It's a strange paradox. You're the most important man in town, and also the most despised. Without you, justice doesn't happen. Law has no teeth. The threat of punishment becomes a bedtime story, not a deterrent. But even though they rely on you to keep the peace, no one wants to admit it. You're the human broom sweeping away the filth they don't want to see, but they still blame you for touching the dirt. The same people who jeer at you in the streets will gather in droves for an execution. They'll bring their children, snack on bread crusts, and shout insults at the condemned like it's a traveling circus. But when the deed is done, when the head rolls or the body swings, every eye turns to you. And suddenly, you're the monster. You did what they wanted done, but they still pretend their hands are clean while yours drip with moral grime. When disease spreads, they whisper that it came from your cursed tools. When crops fail, they mutter that your presence offended God. If a child goes missing or a dog howls at midnight, somehow it circles back to you. Because deep down, they believe your soul is blackened by the deaths you've delivered, even when those deaths were lawful, even necessary. It's easier to point at you than face the system that demands killing in the first place. You're not allowed in the church pews, even though you carry out the verdicts handed down by holy courts. You're not invited to festivals, even though you keep order with every execution. You're part of the machinery of justice, but treated like a ghost who wandered in from the gallows, dripping sins and stinking of sulfur. It's loneliness by design. They need you, but they also need to believe they're better than you. So they elevate your function and erase your humanity. You become a living contradiction, essential but untouchable. And worst of all, there's no fixing it. No amount of kindness or humility or silence changes the fact that when they see you, they don't see a man. They see the axe. Here's a little-known fact. almost no one applied to be an executioner. There was no line of eager young men knocking on the sheriff's door, hoping to slice heads for a living. It wasn't a career path, it was a sentence in disguise. Maybe your father was one, and the job passed down like a family curse. Maybe you made the mistake of killing someone in self-defense, and the judge offered you a deal. Take up the axe, or lose your own head. Or maybe, worst of all, you simply lived near the last guy who died and got volunteered. In many towns, the executioner's role was inherited, not like a noble title, but like a debt. Generational shame wrapped in iron. Entire families bore the burden. Children born into it were marked before they could even lift a blade. Some tried to escape, fleeing to other towns, changing their names, pretending to be butchers or blacksmiths. But people always found out. The profession left a scent on you, a permanent social fingerprint that couldn't be scrubbed away. If you were pressed into the job by force, you had even less luck. Town officials would sometimes select prisoners or debtors to take over the role, promising money and protection. What they didn't mention was that you'd be sleeping in a shack, reviled by every man, woman, and goat in town, and forced to decapitate thieves while the crowd spat at you. In some cases, they even brought in strangers, foreigners who didn't know the local customs, didn't speak the language, didn't realize what they were signing up for. These poor souls often ended up dead themselves, murdered by townspeople who didn't want to see a devil outsider wielding justice. No matter how you got the job, it always came with the same outcome: isolation, loathing, and the slow decay of your own humanity. You weren't chosen because you were special. You were chosen because no one else would do it. Because someone had to. And when that someone was you, your life stopped belonging to you entirely. You became property of the town, of the courts, of the crowd's appetite for violence. You got the job the way people get cursed, by being in the wrong place at the wrong time and living just long enough to regret it. Once upon a time you had a name, a real one, maybe even a good one. People used to say it with familiarity, affection, or at the very least without spitting afterward. You might have been known as Jacob the miller's boy, or Marta's husband, or simply that guy with the limp who helped fix roofs. But now, you're none of those things. Your name has been buried beneath your title. You are the executioner, and that's all anyone will ever let you be again. No one calls out your name in the streets anymore. They avoid calling you anything at all. If they absolutely must refer to you, they do it in whispers, half out of fear, half out of superstition. Him, they say, or the headsman, or the cursed one. Children are told not to speak your name out loud, lest the wind carry it and invite death into the house. Your existence becomes less human, more myth, more warning than person. Even the people who employ you won't use your name. They write it down sparingly, never aloud. Legal documents refer to your position, not your identity. You are a function, an extension of the blade. You cease to exist as an individual. You become folklore while still drawing breath. The irony is that in death, the people you execute are often remembered. Their names are etched in town records, their crimes recorded in court ledgers. Ballads might be sung about them, tales whispered by firelight. But you, the one who sends them over the edge, are left to rot in memory's shadow. The townspeople ensure it. They don't want to remember who you are, because if they do, they might have to admit that you're human. And that would make what you do, what they make you do, far too uncomfortable. Sometimes you try to hold on to your name in secret. You write it into the wood of your bedpost. You whisper it to yourself before sleep. But over time, it fades. You answer only to the role. The job becomes your skin, and what was once a name becomes a ghost that follows you, just out of reach. You didn't just lose your place in society. You lost your identity, and the world prefers it that way. A man can be forgiven, but an executioner, never. If you were hoping for a cozy cottage in the village square, think again. Your home isn't just figuratively on the margins of society, it's physically placed there. Most executioners lived in shacks or huts far from the town's heart, perched on the outskirts like a dark stain the community refused to scrub clean. Some lived near cemeteries, others by the gallows or the leper house. You were put where the dead and the damned already lingered. Out of sight, out of mind. It wasn't by accident. Authorities and villagers wanted you away from their daily lives. No one wanted to hear your footsteps echoing in the marketplace or smell your sweat mixing with theirs in the chapel. They wanted you walled off, literally, if they could manage it. Some towns even built special roads you were only allowed to walk on. The hangman's path, they called it. A dirt trail stained with rumors and footsteps no one wanted to follow. Your house reflected your rank, meaning it didn't. You got what was left. A crumbling hovel, a drafty shack with holes in the roof and no insulation. The wood was warped, the stone cracked, and the windows, if you had any, were more curse than blessing. Rain came through them. So did wind. And sometimes people threw rocks through them just to remind you they still hated you. You weren't even safe inside. Animals avoided your property. Birds wouldn't nest there. Stray dogs howled as they passed. Some said the land itself had turned sour, poisoned by the blood that clung to your boots. And if someone's cow wandered onto your field and died, they'd say you cursed it, they'd come for you. But here's the cruelest part. You couldn't leave. You couldn't pack your things and find a better life in another village. Your face was known. Your title, infamous. No one wanted to take in the man who made the corpses. So you stayed, tucked into your decaying corner of the world, surrounded by silence and shadows. You became part of the outskirts, part of the rot. Your home wasn't just your shelter, it was your boundary, a line drawn between you and the living, and you were never allowed to cross it again. When you live at the edge of society, you don't get neighbors in the traditional sense. No friendly blacksmith stopping by to share a drink. No baker's wife waving from her doorstep. Your closest companions. Rats, maybe a few spiders. And if the rumors are true, a handful of very old ghosts who never quite left the gallows behind. You live in a place where the silence is heavier than the air, and the wind carries more whispers than leaves. The rats don't care who you are. They don't shudder at your footsteps or mutter prayers when you walk by. They don't judge you for your job. They just want the crumbs off your table and the warmth in your walls. In a strange way, they're the only ones that treat you like a person. You feed them without meaning to, and they pay rent in scratching noises and droppings. It's not companionship, but it's consistency. And then there are the other residents, the ones who aren't flesh and bone, because when your house stands near the gallows, when your nights are spent dismembering, strangling, or burning the condemned, something seeps into the wood. Not just blood, not just smoke. Something else. Regret. Fear. Echoes. People say your house is haunted. They speak of cold spots and flickering candlelight. Of voices whispering in corners when no one's there. You've heard them too. Sometimes you think it's your own guilt talking. Other times you wonder if the ones you executed aren't done with you yet. Some nights you wake in a cold sweat, convinced someone is in the room. You reach for the axe out of habit. Not because you're in danger, but because it's the only thing that ever made sense anymore. The blade comforts you more than a prayer ever could. But there are nights when even the axe can't help. when the air feels too still, when the silence listens back. People avoid your road because they say it's cursed. They claim to see figures walking the path at night. No eyes, no faces, just outlines drifting through the mist. You tell yourself they're imagining it, but part of you knows better. You've sent too many souls away not to feel some of them watching from the dark. They were guilty, mostly. Some weren't. Doesn't matter now. You're the one who swung the blade. And they remember. Your neighbors don't talk. They crawl, they hiss, they haunt. They stay close because they have nowhere else to go, just like you. If you're hoping for love, you've already lost. Romance died the day you took the job. Maybe you had a wife once, or a husband, or someone who held your hand without flinching. But they left. Or you pushed them away before the stain of your work spread to them too. Because in the eyes of society, anyone who kisses the executioner might as well be kissing death itself. Intimacy becomes impossible when your very presence is a curse. Forget flirtation. No one makes small talk with the man who sets necks against blocks. At the tavern, women turn their backs. Men avoid eye contact. Matchmakers pretend not to see you. Even prostitutes, desperate for coin, think twice before taking yours. The idea of sharing a bed with the one who ended your cousin's life 2 winters ago. Most would rather sleep with the plague. And if you do find someone brave or desperate enough to love you, good luck keeping them. They'll face the same isolation, the same hatred. They'll be banned from guilds, cursed by their families, denied work just for marrying you. Your curse becomes theirs. Your burden shared, but never lighter. If you have children, it doesn't end. They're born into the shadow of your role. They don't get playmates, they get stares. Some villages even force the children of executioners into the same role, turning the bloodline into a prison that stretches across generations. The job doesn't just haunt you, it sinks into your family tree like rot in the roots. And deep down, you know this. That's why you keep your distance. That's why your heart hardens. You learn to live without affection. You build walls not just around your house, but around your spirit. You tell yourself you don't need anyone. That love is a luxury for people who don't wear blood to work. But sometimes, late at night, when the house creaks and the wind sounds like a sigh, you remember what it felt like. The softness of another hand. A voice that didn't shake when it said your name. And you realize that of all the things this job has taken from you, the hardest to live without is love. There's no uniform for your job, not officially. But everyone knows exactly what you look like. You're the man in the leather hood, the one whose boots never shine, whose hands are always calloused, and whose clothes smell like firewood, blood, and something that might once have been hope. You're not dressed for ceremony. You're dressed for utility, for splatter, for anonymity, and maybe for hiding the last sliver of your humanity. Most executioners wore a heavy cloak or long tunic, often black or dark brown, not because it was fashionable, but because darker cloth doesn't show stains. And you will have stains. Blood, bile, ash, soot, sweat, it all ends up on you. You don't get changed for every event. You don't have a wardrobe of fresh robes. You have one outfit. Maybe 2, if you're lucky. Both carry the scent of death like a perfume you didn't choose. Then there's the hood. Iconic. Ominous. Not always required, but often worn. Sometimes to hide your identity, more often to separate you from yourself. It's easier to swing the blade when you don't have to see your own face in the crowd's reflection. Easier to become the instrument if your eyes are hidden. People assume you wear it to scare others. But the truth is, it's not for them. It's for you. The hood is your last line of defense against your own conscience. You don't wear armor because no one expects you to fight. But in a way, your outfit is armor, just not the kind forged in fire. It's psychological plating, thick boots to crush hesitation, a leather belt to hold the tools of your trade. Gloves, if you can get them, not for protection, but to keep your hands from trembling when the time comes. No jewelry, no bright colors, no insignias. You are not a knight, you are not a soldier, you're a shadow given form, and everything you wear reinforces that. You blend into the edges of the town, the corners of the scaffold, the darker parts of people's memories. You don't want to stand out. You want to be forgotten. But even in the crowd, they know who you are. They recognize the cut of your coat, the smell of iron in your wake. Your outfit is a warning, a walking omen. And no matter how tattered, how filthy, how utterly unremarkable it looks, it still carries more fear than a royal crest ever could. Let's talk about your toolkit, the kind of set no one dreams about unwrapping. No chisels for wood, no quills for poetry. Your tools are built to end lives quickly, or slowly, depending on what the law demands. You don't carry a bag. You carry a burden. One made of steel, fire, and quiet horror. The axe, of course, is the star. Heavy, thick-bladed. Weighted not for elegance, but for certainty. One clean swing, if you're skilled. 2 or 3 if you're not, or if the condemned flinches, or if your hands shake just a little too much that day. Some are double-headed. Some are nicked from years of use. None are ceremonial. Every blade has a story etched in rust and regret. Then there's the sword. Not the gleaming weapon of a knight, but the executioner's sword. Long, flat-tipped, designed specifically for decapitation. Used in more honorable executions, usually for nobles. It's heavy, unwieldy, and unforgiving. One slip, and the crowd sees not justice, but carnage. Ropes come next. For hangings. Hemp, mostly. Braided thick, stretched until just right. Too short, and the person chokes. Too long, and they're decapitated. There's a science to killing that no one teaches you. You learn by failing, once, maybe twice. Eventually, you get good at it, if you don't go mad first. You might also carry branding irons for marking criminals, red-hot pokers for interrogation, tongs for tearing, and the infamous wheel, a wooden device designed not to kill, but to shatter. Limbs crushed into jelly, bones twisted into spirals. The wheel isn't just a tool, it's a statement. It says, "Don't cross the law, or this will be your fate." And let's not forget the small things. Buckets of water for cleaning blood off the scaffold, though never enough. Towels soaked in vinegar, not to sterilize, but to keep the stench down. A wooden wedge to hold a prisoner's mouth open, a stick to bite down on, or maybe just a prayer book, closed, untouched, sitting nearby like a joke no one laughs at anymore. You don't name your tools. That's a luxury for knights and heroes. You don't sharpen them with pride. You do it with obligation, muttering under your breath, hoping the edge holds, not because you care about the prisoner, but because you want it over quickly. For both of you. Because every time you pick up the axe, or the sword, or the rope, you don't just kill them. You kill a little more of yourself. People talk about executions like they're surgical. One clean strike, swift, humane, even. But that's a fantasy told by the comfortable. The reality: execution is messy, unpredictable, and haunted by human error. There's no guarantee the axe hits perfectly. No certainty that the rope breaks the neck instead of stretching it like taffy. And when it goes wrong, really wrong, you're not just the killer. You become the spectacle everyone remembers for the rest of their lives. Let's start with the axe. You swing it with all your strength, aiming for the spine just above the shoulders. But what if the condemned moves? What if your angle is off? What if the blade catches bone but doesn't go through? Now you've got someone screaming, or worse, still conscious. The crowd gasps, some cheer, others vomit. And you? You raise the axe again, praying the second blow does what the first couldn't. And sometimes it takes a third, or a fourth, and every extra strike erodes whatever humanity you have left. The worst part is, it's often not your fault. Axes dull, wood warps, condemned criminals thrash and scream and faint. You're trying to end a life with tools barely fit for a butcher's table. And in the middle of it all, the crowd watches. They don't help. They judge. They turn your mistake into legend. Remember the one where the man's head wouldn't come off? They say. Took 7 swings, blood everywhere. He blinked after the third. That story becomes your reputation. That story follows you to your grave. Even hangings weren't guaranteed to be clean. A short drop left the person kicking, convulsing, choking for minutes. A long drop could snap the spine, or pop the head clean off. You had to measure by eye, adjust by weight, guess how much air was left in their lungs before you kicked the stool. And sometimes you guessed wrong. When people say justice was swift in the Middle Ages, what they really mean is that no one cared if it was graceful. The condemned weren't supposed to die with dignity. They were supposed to suffer just enough to make a lesson. And you? You were the lesson's author, no matter how crude the handwriting. Clean cuts were rare. Accidents were common. And the line between execution and torture was thinner than the edge of your axe. They tell you to aim for the spine, just between the vertebrae, where the blade can pass clean through. But do they tell you that every body is different? That nerves twitch? That muscles tighten in death? That sometimes the condemned are so terrified they flinch the moment you move and ruin the entire strike? No, they don't tell you any of that, because they don't want to know. They just want it over. They just want the head to fall. But heads don't always come off in one swing. The executioner knows this better than anyone. Sometimes the blade sinks halfway in and gets stuck. You hear it, not just the impact, but the way bone resists. A crack, a wet thud, and then silence broken only by a choking noise that no one was prepared for. That's when the crowd starts to shift. Some lean in, others recoil, but they all remember you. The second swing is worse. Now you're cutting through chaos. Blood sprays. The condemned might still be twitching, and your hands, steady an hour ago, now tremble with shame, fatigue, or disgust. But you can't stop. You have to finish. You must finish. The third swing is desperation. The fourth, humiliation. By the fifth, there's no audience anymore, just a horror show you're trapped in, and you can't look away because you're the one starring in it. And here's the awful truth. No one forgives the second swing. The crowd understands one clean stroke. It's harsh, but acceptable. The law in action. But when the blade comes down again, and again, suddenly you're not the hand of justice anymore. You're a butcher, a madman, and they stare at you like they're afraid you might turn on them next. Afterward, you try to wash the blood off. You scrub your hands, your boots, the wood. But it lingers. Under your nails. Behind your eyes. In the dreams that wake you up choking on guilt. You replay it over and over, hoping next time you get it right. But there is no next time for that man. Just another condemned, another swing, another chance to fail again. And maybe, just maybe, you start to wonder if the blade's not the problem. Maybe it's you. Maybe your hands were never meant to hold an axe. But it's too late now, because the heads don't always come off in one swing, and neither do the consequences. You don't execute people in silence. That's not how medieval justice works. When someone is condemned, it's not just a punishment, it's entertainment. And you're not just the executioner. You're the opening act, main event, and gruesome finale rolled into one. The crowd gathers before dawn, packed shoulder to shoulder in the square. They bring bread, flasks of ale, children on shoulders. They chant, joke, scream, curse, and they wait for you. They don't come for justice, they come for the show. Some want blood, others want closure. A few just want something to break the crushing boredom of peasant life. And when you climb the scaffold, axe in hand or rope slung over your shoulder, all eyes turn to you. Not with reverence, not even with fear, with hunger. The kind of hunger only death can feed. This isn't some solemn ritual, this is a festival of violence. Vendors shout over the cries of the condemned. Drunkards bet how long the hanging will take. Children laugh at the trembling prisoner like it's a puppet show. The air stinks of sweat, livestock, and tension so thick it might snap before the noose does. You scan the crowd and wonder who'll flinch and who'll cheer. Will they jeer if you botch it? Will they throw rotten fruit? Or worse, will they smile? That's the moment that unsettles you most, when someone smiles. Because that means they're enjoying this. Your worst moment is their weekend plan, and no matter how numb you've become, it still gets to you. The way they revel in death like it's a wedding feast. Sometimes the crowd turns cruel. They throw stones, not at the criminal, but at you, because you're too slow, or too fast, or because they just needed a target that day. You're easy to blame, a scapegoat in leather and grime. After all, they don't remember the judge. They don't chant the sheriff's name, they remember yours, or at least your title. "Hangman," they roar, "make him dance." And the moment the deed is done, there's a cheer. A noise so deafening it drowns out the dying gasps. It's not relief, it's satisfaction. And as the crowd disperses, chattering like they just left a play, you stand on the scaffold alone, blood drying at your feet, and you realize something. They never cared about guilt or innocence. Only the spectacle, only the noise, only you. Execution isn't just a job, it's a ritual. And you're not just the blade. You're the actor, the spectacle, the centerpiece of a blood-soaked stage. When dawn breaks on execution day, you don't roll out of bed groggy and invisible. You prepare. Every movement must be deliberate. Every gesture, theatrical. The town doesn't want efficiency, it wants drama, fear, closure. You're not there to kill. You're there to perform a death. You wake before the sun, if you even slept at all. Your tools must be spotless. Not for morality's sake, those days are long gone, but because a dull blade means a messy act, and a messy act means you risk becoming a laughingstock or a pariah again. You inspect your rope, test your axe's edge, say whatever words help keep your hands from shaking. Then you dress. Your cloak isn't fancy, but it's dramatic. It flows. It signals authority, fear, finality. As you walk to the scaffold, people watch. The silence shifts. A hush follows you like a bad omen. No one dares speak to you, but they all stare. Every step is rehearsed. You've done this before, many times. You know the rhythm. You feel the beat in your bones like a death drum. At the platform, the prisoner's already there, bound, weeping, praying, or sometimes calm in a way that unsettles you. You don't speak much. You're not paid for poetry. But if you do say something, "Forgive me," or "May God have mercy," you say it with weight, with timing, like a stage cue before the curtain falls. And when the time comes, when the crowd surges with anticipation, you lift your weapon not just with strength, but with style. It has to look purposeful, like fate, like doom in motion. You cannot afford hesitation, not just because it prolongs suffering, but because it shatters the illusion. They want certainty. You must become the symbol of that certainty, even if your hands ache, even if your heart is breaking. The moment the body drops, the crowd erupts or recoils. Either way, they get what they came for. But your performance isn't over. You must still clean the platform, arrange the body, reset the stage. Because someone else will come next week, or tomorrow, and when they do, you'll be here. In costume, in character, in silence. You're not just the executioner, you're the last actor in a brutal play, and your role always ends in applause or screams. When your life revolves around death, the only thing keeping you from losing your mind is the ability to laugh. Not because anything is funny, but because the alternative is screaming into the void. Gallows humor isn't just a phrase. It's survival, a coping mechanism, the executioner's private language. You make jokes no one else dares tell, and you say them to an audience of no one, just to keep the silence from swallowing you whole. You joke about the condemned's last words, about the time the rope broke and the prisoner tried to run and tripped over his own feet, about the time someone was so drunk at their own hanging that they started singing halfway up the ladder. These are not polite jokes. They're sharp, bitter, dangerous. But in your world, they're all that's left. You laugh at the absurdity because if you start taking it seriously, really seriously, you won't stop crying. No one else laughs with you, of course. Not out loud. Maybe another executioner, once, from a neighboring town. You shared a drink, swapped stories, laughed until your ribs hurt about who had the worst audience, the worst blade, the worst nightmare. It was the closest you'd come to friendship in years. Humor becomes armor. You smile through tragedy. You make fun of the system that makes you both necessary and disposable. You make jokes about your cursed bed, your rat-infested house, your benefits package, which consists of not being hanged yet. You laugh when a noble complains that the scaffold smells. You laugh when they offer you a bonus for handling 3 executions in a week. You laugh when they tell you to make it quick, as if that's ever been your choice. And the darkest part? Sometimes you laugh at the condemned themselves, not because they deserve it, but because watching them tremble reminds you too much of yourself. It's cruel. You know that. But it's also honest. The fear on their face mirrors your own, buried under years of rot and silence. So you chuckle at their bravado, their whimpering, their defiance, because you understand all of it. And it hurts. So you make jokes, quiet ones, bitter ones. You chuckle at misery, you smirk at death, because if you didn't, you'd fall apart. And no one wants to see the executioner cry. As if executions weren't enough, the job didn't end with a swing of the axe. Sometimes, the court didn't want death. It wanted information, a confession, a name, a spectacle. And when it did, guess who they called? Not the judge, not the priest, you. The executioner was also the torturer, unpaid, untrained, but always available, another service rendered by the man nobody wanted to look at. Torture wasn't neat. It wasn't even efficient. It was slow, loud, and messy. You weren't asking questions. You were dragging answers out of people. True or false didn't matter. They just needed a name, a signature, a broken spirit. You'd be handed the accused and a list of preferred methods, and you'd nod, pick up the tools, and go to work. Because saying no meant trouble, or worse, replacement. The rack, the wheel, the thumbscrews, the iron boot, hot pokers, whips, ropes. You had access to all of it, whether you wanted it or not. The accused were tied down and offered one last chance to talk. When they didn't, or couldn't, you were expected to encourage them. So you did. You learned how to pull joints without breaking bones, how to keep someone conscious through agony, how to scream with them in your ears and not flinch. You weren't paid extra for this. Torture was part of the invisible job description, slipped in between executions like it was nothing. Some towns offered a few coins. Others just gave you bread. Most gave you nothing. Just another nightmare to carry home and replay behind your eyes. Sometimes the tortured were guilty. Sometimes they were just unlucky. Foreigners, widows, people with the wrong book under their bed. You learned not to ask. The less you knew, the easier it was to finish the task. And yet, something always stuck. A name, a face, a scream that sounded too much like a child's. Torture changed you. It stripped away your last defenses. You couldn't joke about it like you did with executions. There was no clean finish, no final swing, just a long, drawn-out collapse. And when it was over, no one thanked you. No one even looked at you. You cleaned the blood, burned the rags, and walked home. Torture wasn't your job, but it became part of your life. A side hustle no one spoke of. But everyone knew you did, and you hated it. But you did it anyway. Most people don't face death with dignity. They don't spit in your face or curse the heavens. That's fiction. What really happens, what you've seen 100 times, is begging. Real, raw, sobbing desperation. Pleas for mercy, for delay, for someone, anyone to stop you. It doesn't matter what they did. When the rope's around their neck or their head is on the block, they all sound the same. Please, wait. I didn't mean to. Tell my children I love them. And every time you do the same thing, you swing. You have to. It's your job. You're not allowed to care. The law doesn't make space for emotion. The judge gives the sentence, the town demands the punishment, and your hands are the tool that carries it out. You aren't the one who decides. You're just the one who finishes it. But that doesn't mean it doesn't haunt you. Because sometimes the begging gets under your skin. A childless mother. A man sobbing for a wife who's already dead. A thief who only stole because winter was crueler than the law. These aren't just criminals. They're human. They look like you. They sound like you. They could be you. And that thought is more dangerous than any blade. The crowd doesn't want to hear the begging. It makes them uncomfortable. So they cheer louder, boo harder, drown it out with shouts. But you hear it, always. Even years later, you hear the voices. Some begged with words, others with eyes. Some were too weak to speak, but they begged all the same, with trembling lips and the terror in their bones. And what do? You steel yourself. You grip the axe tighter. You pretend you didn't hear. Because the worst sin isn't swinging too hard. It's hesitating. That's what makes it torture, for them and for you. So you learn to swing without listening, to block out the sobs, the prayers, the last words that were never meant for you. But later, alone, those voices return. They echo in your empty house between the floorboards, in your dreams. You remember the names, the faces, the broken voices, and you wonder how many of them were innocent. You wonder if anyone begged when your name was chosen for this cursed profession. And then, just like always, you laugh, or you drink, or you sit in the dark, because there's no one left to beg for you. Justice in the medieval world wasn't about truth. It was about order, fear, control, and sometimes sacrifice. Courts didn't always get it right. Witnesses lied. Officials were bribed. Priests made decisions based on omens and rumors. And the people who suffered most from those mistakes? You killed them. You know you did. Maybe the first time it happened, you told yourself it wasn't your fault. You didn't pass the sentence. You didn't hold the trial. But you remember the woman who wouldn't stop screaming she was innocent. The young boy accused of theft because he wore a dead noble's boots. The priest who spoke the wrong sermon and never came back from his confession. These weren't criminals. These were victims of convenience, and you still swung. It's not that you didn't care, it's that you couldn't afford to. If you paused, if you let doubt creep in, you'd never move again. Doubt is poison. It rots the hand. It softens the heart. And this job has no room for softness. So you lie to yourself. You pretend they were all guilty. You tell yourself there must have been evidence you didn't see. That someone else knew better. That mercy is above your station. But some faces won't leave you. You remember the ones who looked confused, who didn't understand why they were there, who didn't scream or beg or resist because they were too stunned to believe this was real. You saw it in their eyes. The fear was different. Not fear of death, fear of injustice, of betrayal, that the world they trusted had turned on them. Those executions stay with you longer than the others. They echo every time you lift the blade. They whisper to you in your sleep. You knew, they say. You knew I didn't belong there. And the terrible truth is they're right. Some were guilty. Some were monsters. But not all. You saw the difference. You felt it in your bones. And you did it anyway. Because that's the job. You don't deliver truth. You deliver finality. And the dead don't get second chances. One of the great, unspoken terrors of your job is the uncertainty. You think execution is absolute, that death is a single moment. Clean. Done, but it's not. The human body doesn't always obey the rules. Sometimes it resists. Sometimes it lingers. And sometimes it doesn't realize it's supposed to be dead yet. You've seen it happen. The beheading that didn't go all the way through. The hanging where the man twitched for 10 minutes, lips purple, eyes bulging, neck groaning but not breaking. The burning where someone screamed for far longer than they should have. You were told it was over, but the body moved. Not reflexes, not spasms. Movement. Conscious. A final, desperate attempt to live a little longer in a world that already decided they don't belong in it. And when it happens, the crowd reacts. Some recoil, some cheer louder, some cry. But you freeze. For a split second, you're not the executioner. You're just a man watching another human defy death with every cell in their body. And then duty kicks back in. You do what needs to be done. You finish it. Whether it means another swing, or stepping on the chest, or pulling the rope tighter, or adding fire to the flame, you erase what shouldn't have lasted, but still did. You tell yourself it was a fluke, a muscle misfire, a twitch, the mind trying to trick you. But deep down, you know better. You know when someone's still in there, when they look at you after the blade comes down, when they blink, when their mouth moves but no sound escapes. You don't talk about it. No one does. Because if you admit it, then you have to admit that you failed, that your hands weren't sure enough, that death didn't come fast enough, that someone suffered because of you. Sometimes they die long after the audience leaves. Sometimes they bleed out slowly, alone, forgotten on the scaffold. You're left to clean the mess. You whisper apologies no one will hear. You watch their blood flow as if it might spell out a reason. And still, the next morning, you're expected to smile, sharpen your tools, and do it again. The dead don't always die when you tell them to, and that's when the job becomes something darker than even you expected. The final indignity of your job is what comes after the death. You don't just kill, you dispose, but not like a priest, gently closing the eyes and whispering a prayer. No, you're not allowed the grace of burial. You don't get to dig graves, mark headstones, or light candles. You get to remove the evidence, toss it, burn it, hang it where crows can feast and the townspeople can point and say, "Let that be a warning." Executed bodies weren't always buried. Many were displayed, strung up in cages, nailed to walls, left to rot at crossroads. Their faces twisted in eternal agony, their flesh devoured by birds. This was by design. Public death wasn't about justice, it was about memory. The authorities wanted people to remember what happened to thieves, to heretics, to traitors, and that meant leaving the corpse where everyone could see it decay. And you're the one who puts it there. You hoist the body, bind it in iron, hang it high. You tie weights to it so it doesn't fall when the bones snap. You smear pitch on the skin to slow the rot, only so the horror lasts longer. You become both butcher and decorator. Your handiwork becomes part of the town's skyline. And when it's time to finally remove it, you don't get to bury it in hallowed ground. Churches won't allow it. Cemeteries reject you. So you haul it to the outskirts, maybe a ditch, a pile of stones, a shallow grave behind your own shack. You dig with a broken spade and no ceremony. You say no words. You drop the bones in silence, cover them quickly, and hope no one asks questions. Sometimes families beg you for the body, offer coin, weep. They want a proper farewell, and maybe you want to give it to them. Maybe you even try. But the law says no. Executed criminals don't get forgiveness. They get forgotten. But you remember. You remember where you buried them, which tree they lie beneath, which nights they moaned before going still. And when the wind howls through your roof and the ground shifts under your feet, you wonder if the dead remember you too. You don't bury the bodies for peace. You bury them for distance, to keep the rot away from your doorstep. But it never stays buried for long. There's no glory in this job, no medals, no riches, and certainly no respect. When payday comes, you don't line up with the blacksmiths or merchants, chin held high, hands out for gold. You wait. You wait because the sheriff doesn't want to hand you the coins directly, because the clerk wrinkles his nose like you smell of graves. And when you finally get paid, it's not enough. Not for the blood, not for the silence, not for the ghosts. Your income isn't consistent. Some executions pay better than others. Noble blood fetches more than a peasant's, especially if it's public. Torture might get you a bonus if the town's in a generous mood. But most days, you're scraping by. You live off scraps. Literal scraps. Leftover bread from trials. Bones from the butcher, maybe a chicken that died of old age, thrown your way by someone too scared to charge you for it. Fear is your true currency. People avoid taxing you. They don't dare shortchange you. But they also won't help you. You're fed because people fear your hunger. You're sheltered because no one wants to imagine what happens if you're homeless. And when you're paid, it's usually in coin so tarnished and bent it feels like an insult. You can't haggle, you can't complain. The moment you speak up, the town remembers how dispensable you are. There's always another man desperate enough to take the hood, they whisper. You know that voice, you've heard it before. Maybe even said it to yourself when the last executioner vanished and the job came to you. Occasionally, someone leaves you a gift. A loaf of bread, a bottle of sour ale. Not out of kindness, out of guilt. Or superstition. Maybe they think it'll keep you from dreaming about them when your own time comes. You accept it silently, and when you eat it, it tastes like ash. And the worst part? If a plague hits, or the coffers dry up, your pay stops altogether. But the work doesn't. The heads still roll, the ropes still snap, and you still clean the mess no one else will touch. Payment, in the end, becomes irrelevant. You don't do it for the coin. You do it because you're trapped. You're not fed well. You're not paid fairly. You're sustained on fear, leftovers, and a system that needs you just enough to keep you alive, but never comfortable. The blade you wield, the one that ends lives and stains your hands forever, it isn't yours. Not legally, not emotionally. It belongs to the town, the crown, the law. You don't get to treat it like a knight treats his sword. You don't name it. You don't keep it under lock and key in a place of pride. You pick it up when summoned and return it when dismissed. It's a tool, like you. After an execution, you clean it. Not because you're proud of it, but because someone will inspect it. And if the blade is chipped, if it rusts, if it breaks, they won't blame the blacksmith, they'll blame you. You let the tool degrade. You mishandled the symbol of justice. So you polish it, even when your hands shake. Even when the blood won't fully scrub off, you shine it until it reflects your face, then look away. Sometimes the axe is passed down, not from father to son, but from executioner to executioner, as if carrying a curse like a chain. You hold it knowing how many it's killed. You feel the weight of every swing not your own. It hums with history, soaked in silence, humming like a whisper at your hip. You don't get to take it home. Most towns require it be stored at the gallows, in a locked shed or hidden pit. The axe is chained, not to prevent theft, but to prevent fear. If someone saw you carrying it freely, it might cause panic. If a child found it, it might birth a legend. So it's hidden. The symbol of death is too powerful to be seen often. Even the materials aren't yours. If the town can't afford a new axe, they might give you a recycled one. A weapon once used in war, repurposed for justice. You notice the difference. A military blade doesn't swing clean. It hacks. It tears. You say nothing. You adapt. Because complaining about your tools makes you look weak. And you cannot be weak, not here. The axe isn't yours. It never was. You are merely the hand that holds it, the arm that swings. And when you die, or disappear, or vanish into madness, it will go to someone else, just like you did. Because the axe doesn't belong to a man. It belongs to the system that made him. There was a time when you believed in God, or at least you tried. You went to Mass. You knelt, you crossed yourself when death passed by. But now you are death. And when you enter the church, even the priests grow silent. Not out of reverence, out of unease. You don't get absolution. You get avoidance. Most clergy won't speak to you unless required by law. Some refuse to take confession from your lips. Others give you the blessing so quickly it sounds like they're rushing through a curse. Because to them, you've crossed a line. Between justice and sin, punishment and pleasure, holy law and human failure. You're the one who dirties your hands while they keep theirs folded in prayer. And yet they need you. They preach divine order, but someone has to enforce it. The executioner is the tool of earthly justice. A necessary evil, they whisper, while stepping back so you don't brush their robes with blood they pretend not to see. When a condemned man begs for last rites, it's you who stands closest during their final words. Not the priest. He stays just far enough away to smell nothing, to see nothing, to believe his role is still pure. You notice it in the little things. Communion bread passed to you with fingertips only. Holy water offered but never blessed aloud. No invitation to feast days, no shared wine after a baptism. Your children, if you have any, grow up watching the village kneel before the altar, while you stand in the back, unseen, unwanted, as if even God turns his face when you enter. And the cruelest part? You still go, because part of you still wants forgiveness, still hopes there's some grace left in the world for someone like you. You listen to sermons about redemption, but none of them sound like they were written for your kind. You hear about sin, about the price of taking life, but no one explains what to do when it's your job. Eventually, you stop attending, not because you've lost faith, but because you're tired of pretending you're welcome, tired of feeling like a beast in a temple. You pray in private now, quietly, shamefully, like a thief. And maybe God hears you, but he never answers. The crowd comes for the drama. The officials come for the order. The priest comes for the soul. But when the last breath is drawn, the cheers fade, and the crowd disperses, you are the only one who stays. The execution is over. But the mess it leaves behind? That's yours to deal with. Alone. The blood doesn't vanish. It pools. It soaks into the planks, seeps into your boots. It drips from blades and ropes and soaked hoods. The smell is sharp, metallic, earthy, wrong. You try to scrub it clean with buckets of water and vinegar, but it never really comes off. Some stains are permanent. Some blood binds itself to wood and soul alike. No one helps. The sheriff walks away, cloak billowing. The priest is gone before the rope even swings. The townspeople turn their backs. Even your assistant, if you have one, suddenly finds a reason to vanish when the real work begins. You scrub with worn rags and blistered hands, you haul bodies, you carry limbs, you sweep teeth and clumps of hair into corners where no one will notice. And when the scaffold's clean, you still feel the blood, in the cracks, in your fingertips, under your nails. You smell it even after you wash. You taste it in your throat when you sleep. It becomes part of your existence, like smoke in the walls of a long-burning house. There are days when the blood fights back. It stains your clothes so deep that even the rats hesitate. It freezes in winter, black and slick, a mirror of your reflection. It soaks into your dreams. You wake choking on it, sure you've drowned in someone else's suffering. And when it rains, the water brings the blood back to life. It rises from the wood like old ghosts, red rivers in the mud, trails that lead nowhere, but always begin at your feet. No one helps you clean it. No one even watches. The execution is a performance. The cleanup is a punishment. For them, justice ends when the head rolls. For you, it never ends. Because the blood is yours now, not by guilt, but by proximity. And it always finds its way home. At night, the village sleeps peacefully behind locked shutters and warm hearths, but you sleep where no one else dares. Your house, if you can call it that, stands on the outskirts, beyond the last lantern, past the churchyard, near the old trees where birds stop singing. No one visits. No one asks to come inside. It's not just fear. They think your home is cursed, that the walls remember screams, that the soil drinks more than rain. You didn't choose it. The town chose it for you. When you took the job, they gave you a plot of land far from their children, their wells, their temples, a place downwind from the stables, and they called it generous. But the truth is, they were hiding you, keeping you where your shadow wouldn't fall across their streets, where your life wouldn't remind them of death. Your bed is hard, the roof leaks, the floor creaks under your weight like it resents holding you. In winter, the wind slices through the boards like a knife. In summer, the stench of old blood, smoke, and rot rises from the ground itself. No matter how much you clean, it lingers. You breathe it, you wear it, It clings to you like the ghosts you never asked to meet. There are nights when animals scratch at your walls. Rats, mostly, sometimes foxes. Once, a wolf, its eyes gleaming like judgment. You don't chase them away. You understand them. They're scavengers just like you, feeding off the dead, surviving in silence. The difference is they don't carry shame. Sometimes the townsfolk leave offerings nearby, coins, bread, candles, not for charity, for protection. They think if they give you a token, your spirit won't haunt them after death, as if 5 copper coins can buy forgiveness for the way they treated you. You accept it, you spend it, but it doesn't warm the room or ease the dreams. You don't lock your door, you don't have to. No one dares enter. The fear does the work for you. It keeps you isolated, protected, alone. And in that darkness, when you lie still and the silence settles thick as ash, you realize something. They banished you to this house so they wouldn't have to face what they created. And now, this place is your coffin. You just haven't laid down for good yet. Love is something you watch from afar. You see couples on market days, fingers entwined. You hear laughter through open shutters, children chasing each other through the grass. But when it comes to you, the executioner, the laughter fades. The eyes drop. The doors close. You are not part of that world. You are tolerated, not welcomed. Needed, not wanted. No one dreams of marrying the man who carries death in his hands. Mothers pull their daughters closer when you walk by. Fathers glance at you with suspicion, even if you've done nothing but nod a greeting. The idea of family, of a partner, of sharing your life with someone. It feels like fiction, something from a tale told to children before they know better. Even if someone dared to love you, they'd pay a price. Their friends would vanish. Their shop would lose customers. Their name would be whispered in corners, tied forever to the gallows and the blood. And any child born from that union? Marked. The hangman's boy. The executioner's daughter. Not innocent, but stained by association. A future already decided before the first breath. Some executioners inherit the role. Fathers pass it down to sons, not as honor, but as survival. Because no one else will take them. Because the world has already closed its doors. So the curse continues, generation after generation, bound not by blood, but by isolation. You've tried, maybe. You've smiled. You've offered what little kindness you could, but the looks always return. The nervous glances, the whispered warnings, even the lonely turn away from you. Not out of cruelty, but because no one wants to build a life on the scaffold. So you grow used to silence. You learn to love in fragments, brief moments of connection, a shared word at the well, a warm look never repeated. You carry those moments like treasures, even though they fade quickly. Because that's all you're allowed. You sleep alone, you eat alone, you age alone. And when your body finally gives out, there won't be a mourning wife or grieving child, just a town clerk sighing, already looking for someone desperate enough to take your place. Because no one wants to marry the executioner. And in the end, even love is afraid of you. When the town throws a feast, you stay home. When the church rings bells for harvest or victory, you listen from the edge of the village. And when the festivals come, bright banners, firelight, music, you walk the long way around. You're not part of it. Not welcome. Your hands are too stained, your presence too uncomfortable. But the strange, bitter irony is this. Your work is always invited. The highlight of many festivals is punishment. A spectacle, a public hanging or flogging or beheading, perfectly timed between a street performance and the roast pig. They save it for just before the dancing begins. Not too early, not too late. Just enough death to whet the appetite. You're not a guest, you're part of the program. So you arrive quietly, do your duty, swing the axe, drop the trap door, crack the whip. The crowd claps, roars, sometimes laughs, and then they move on. They eat candied nuts, they cheer acrobats, they kiss under lanterns, and you're left behind on the stage, surrounded by the silence only fresh blood brings. You clean up fast, because nothing ruins a festival like the smell of real suffering. Then you vanish, slipping away like smoke, back into the dark. The party continues. Your name is never mentioned. Sometimes children sneak glimpses of you. They call you names, make jokes, throw pebbles, but only from a distance. Up close, no one wants to see the eyes of the man who just killed someone. Even when you're masked, they can feel it. The crowd laughs while you bleed silently behind your hood. The worst is when they give you a token thank you. A cup of wine, a bit of food left on a step, as if that makes it better. As if their gratitude erases the fact that they cheered louder for the execution than they did for the parade. Your absence at the festival is always noticed, but never mourned. Good riddance, they think. Let the hangman eat alone. But deep down, they know, without you, there is no final act, no release of tension, no reminder of law and order. You're the fear that makes the joy sweeter, the shadow that gives the flame its glow. You're not invited, but your work, always center stage. They rest in a locked chest or behind a barred door, wrapped in cloth that can't hide their purpose. Your tools, the axe, the rope, the branding iron, don't need to move to terrify. They exist, and that's enough. Even untouched, they radiate dread. When someone passes near them, they flinch, as if death might escape from the grain of the wood or the rust of the blade. You don't display them, you're not proud, but you must maintain them. They have to be sharp, ready, reliable. If a tool fails in the moment of justice, the fault is yours. So you sharpen in silence, oil the metal, test the hinges. You do it where no one can see, because even the sight of your tools is considered a curse. Sometimes the townspeople beg you to keep them away. Don't store it near the well, they say. Not in the barn. The cattle are skittish. You've been accused of spoiling milk, souring wine, and turning births breech because of proximity. Not action. Just the idea that death lives in your shed is enough to make people whisper. Even the wood your axe handle is made from holds power, they say. Superstitions bloom like rot. If a child touches the hangman's tools, they'll die before winter. If the rope breaks, the spirit escapes. If you dream of the branding iron, it means a traitor lives nearby. You've heard them all, and you've never denied them, because fear is your shield. Their belief keeps them away. But it's not just villagers. Sometimes you fear them too, not because of what they are, but because of what they've become. Symbols, extensions of your past mistakes. You remember every drop of blood they've drawn. You feel the weight when you lift them. They don't just cut flesh. They cut memory. Every notch, every dent, every stain tells a story. And every story ends the same way. You keep them hidden. Not because you're ashamed, but because you know how powerful they are, even when they sleep. They say the sword of justice must never rust, but no one tells you what to do when justice starts whispering back. You don't need a costume to frighten children. You don't need claws or glowing eyes. Your presence alone is enough. In the streets, in the market, even at a distance, they see you and their games stop. Their laughter dies. Their eyes widen with a fear too pure for their age. You are not a man to them. You are a thing, a legend that walks, a nightmare wrapped in skin. Parents use your name like a threat. Finish your chores or the executioner will come. Don't lie or he'll know. You are a bedtime story twisted into life. And the worst part? You play along. Not because you want to, but because it's easier than fighting the role they've already written for you. Some children throw stones. Not hard, just enough to prove they're brave. Their friends cheer them on from behind barrels, behind fences. You say nothing, you just keep walking. Because if you turn, if you speak, they'll scream, and that will stay with them longer than the stones ever would. Once in a while, one will get curious. They'll approach, wide-eyed, clutching a broken toy or a stale bit of bread. They'll ask if you live with ghosts, if your hands are cold, if your eyes are red in the dark. And you'll want to tell them the truth, that you're just a man, alone and tired, that you sleep on straw like everyone else, that your hands only shake when no one's watching. But you don't. Because innocence is the one thing you're not allowed to touch. Even your own children, if you have them, learn to keep distance. They grow up fast, faster than they should. They carry your name like a wound. They sit apart in school, picked last for games. And when they cry, no teacher comforts them, because mercy doesn't reach the children of death. So you stop trying. You become the monster they expect. You stay silent. You keep to the shadows. You let their fear protect them. From you, from your job, from the weight of knowing what lies beneath the hood. Because deep down you know they're not wrong. You are what they fear. And that's exactly how the world wants it. The rains come late. The crops rot. A child catches fever. The cows refuse to calve. And somehow, always, the town looks to you. They don't say it aloud, not at first. But you feel their eyes. You hear the whispered blame thicken the air like fog. Because when things go wrong, and no one can fix it, they look for someone to punish. And you're already halfway there. It doesn't matter that you don't control the skies, that your hands have never touched a field, that you too suffer when the food runs low. Logic doesn't survive long in fear, and nothing says curse quite like the man who kills with permission. You're the scapegoat hiding in plain sight. Some say the scaffold poisons the land. That blood spilled too often turns the soil sour. That death breeds death. The gallows wood creaks in the wind, and they claim it sings. A fox crosses your path? Omen. A crow nests near your door. Curse. A fog lingers too long? It's because you walked through it first. They burn herbs outside your house. Nail charms to your door without asking. Toss salt behind you in the street. All quiet signs that they believe you've brought something into their lives that doesn't belong. And if a harvest fails twice, if the plague comes again, they may do more than whisper. You've seen it before. Towns that turned on their own hangmen. A crowd too hungry, too desperate, dragging him from his shack with ropes he didn't tie. You remember his eyes, wide, not afraid, just tired. Because he knew, like you do, that in the end, the blade turns both ways. So you stay low. You keep to your path. You nod, but don't speak. You repair your roof quietly, away from curious eyes. You feed your fire with silence, not wood. Because when the skies darken and the rain turns black, it's not the priest they blame. It's the man who already carries death. And some storms don't come from clouds. They come from people. There's a sound you never forget. The creak of rope tightening, straining under the weight of a body that just left this world. It lingers long after the crowd leaves, long after the scaffold dries. And at night, when you lie in your narrow bed, that sound returns. You hear it in the beams above your head. You hear it when the wind rattles the shutters. You hear it in your dreams. Not just the sound, but the feeling of the rope pulling something out of you. It doesn't matter how many you've hanged. Each one leaves a thread behind. And over time, those threads twist together until they become a noose around your mind. You wake up sweating, gasping. Sure, someone's behind you. But it's just the rope. Always the rope. Coiled in your memory. Whispering. You dream of knots. Of hands tying and untying. Of men climbing ladders with tears in their eyes. Of trapdoors that refuse to open or open too soon. Sometimes the dream ends before the body drops. Sometimes it never ends at all. Just an endless tightening. An eternal gasp. And when you wake, you still feel it. Around your throat. On your hands. Inside your chest like a second heartbeat. You reach for your tools, half asleep. Ready to fix a problem that no longer exists. Some nights, the rope talks. Not with words. With weight, with pressure. With memory. It reminds you that it's never truly gone. You burn one rope, and the next day you're handed another. Fresh, clean, ready to serve. But you know it's not clean. Not really. It remembers the neck it snapped last week. And the one before that. It's soaked in silence. The rope has become a symbol. Not just of death, but of routine. You tie it like you tie your shoes. You measure it by the inch. You check the grain. You test the weight. You try to forget what it's meant for, but your body remembers. Your soul remembers. And when your time finally comes, when the town decides your name should be the last one on the list, you wonder if the rope will recognize you. If it will whisper something different that day. Or if it will simply tighten, like it always does. Everyone remembers their first. Not their first love. Not their first heartbreak. Their first execution. And you remember everything. The time of day, the color of the sky, the smell of the rope, the sound the crowd made, like a single held breath. You remember your hands, how they trembled, how the axe felt heavier than it should have, how the condemned looked at you, not with hate but with fear, as if you were death itself. You remember thinking, I can't do this. But then the voice came. The sheriff, the priest, the crowd. Do it. And so you did. The swing was not clean. It never is. You missed by an inch. The blade caught bone, not neck. Blood sprayed sideways. The crowd gasped. The body twitched. And you froze, just for a second. But that second lasted a lifetime. Then you swung again and again, until the world was quiet. You went home that night in silence. You didn't eat. You didn't speak. You stared at your hands until the candle died. And then you cried. Not out of guilt, but out of realization. This was your life now. This was you. No turning back. You didn't sleep for days. Every time you closed your eyes, you saw their face. Not angry, not cruel, just afraid. And that fear burned itself into your memory like a brand. Even now, you could draw their face with your eyes shut. You remember the scars, the stubble, the broken tooth. You remember the last words. They said your name. Not to curse you, just to ask, will it hurt? You didn't answer, and no matter how many followed, how many screamed or begged or cursed, you always go back to that first one. That first swing, that first failure, that first moment when you stopped being someone and became something else. People think time makes it easier, that repetition dulls the pain. But it doesn't. You just learn to bury it deeper, to build layers of silence and routine until the memories become shadows. But the first never fades. It waits for you, in the mirror, in the edge of your blade, in the second between raising your arm and bringing it down. And it always asks the same question: do you remember me? You do. You always will. They say time makes things easier, that repetition dulls pain, that the more you do something, the less it hurts. But with executions, it's the opposite. Every time you climb those wooden steps, every time you tie the knot or lift the axe, it reminds you of the first, of the last, of all of them. One death does not erase another. They pile up like stones on your chest, each one heavier than the last. You don't forget, not really. You learn to bury the memories, to file them away in some dark corner of your mind. But each time you walk the path to the scaffold, they stir. The faces return. The final words ring in your ears. The weight of your tools pulls at your shoulder like the hands of the dead. Every execution is a mirror. Sometimes you see the condemned, and it's someone you know, a face you passed in the street, a woman who once gave you bread, a man who nodded at you in the tavern, and you wonder, what did they do? Were they guilty? Were they just unlucky? Other times you see yourself, not the one swinging the axe, the one waiting for it. You imagine being on your knees, hands tied, heartbeat crashing in your ears, and you wonder, when your day comes, will someone hesitate? Will they see you as human, or just another name on the list? The crowd thinks it's a performance, a clean, perfect act of justice. But you know better. It's messy, ugly, real. And that's why it stays with you, because it should. Because forgetting would mean losing what's left of your soul. Sometimes you go through the motions with numb hands and a locked jaw. But inside, you're screaming. Because no matter how many times you do it, no matter how practiced your movements become, there's always a part of you that feels it all. And that part, it never hardens. The blade swings, the rope tightens, the silence follows, and then the memory begins. Every execution isn't just another job. It's another ghost. There was a time you told yourself what you did was justice, that the law was clear, that right and wrong were written in ink and signed by men wiser than you. But the longer you live this life, the more the lines blur, and you start to ask dangerous questions. What if the guilty weren't all guilty? What if the innocent were just unlucky? What if, in doing your duty, you became the very thing you were hired to stop? You've seen it happen. A thief hanged for stealing bread during famine. A man tortured into confession only to be pardoned after his death. A child accused of sorcery, condemned by fear, not fact. And through it all, you did your part. You stood there. You listened. You swung. At what point does just following orders become complicity? The town calls you a necessary evil, but when you lie awake at night, you wonder how much of the evil part is starting to feel familiar. The silence after a clean kill doesn't feel like peace. It feels like permission. And every time you step onto the scaffold, it gets harder to tell whether you're enforcing the law or hiding behind it. You remember one case. A woman who begged to see her child one last time. She wasn't crying, she wasn't cursing, just asking. Gently. You were told to proceed. The magistrate said, "Justice waits for no one." And so you obeyed. You still see her eyes. You still wonder if that one swing was justice or murder dressed up as law. No one trains you for that feeling. No one tells you what to do when your own soul starts asking questions the law can't answer. You hold the axe and you wonder, is this justice or convenience? Is this punishment or performance? Is this right or just routine? And worst of all, sometimes you stop asking because the answers are too heavy. The line is thin, and every day you walk it. One misstep and you fall, not into madness, but into something far more dangerous. Apathy. There's a moment, just before the blade falls, just before the trapdoor drops, when the condemned looks at you. Not at the crowd, not at the priest, not at the sky. You are the last thing they see, the final shape in a fading world. And in that instant, something passes between you, something no prayer can erase. They look to you for mercy, not because they think you'll grant it, but because you're the last person with the power to. Even if the sentence is signed, even if the crime is proven, they hold on to a sliver of hope that the man behind the hood is human. That maybe, just maybe, something in your eyes will tremble, will soften, will stop. Sometimes they curse you, spit, scream your name. They want you to feel their hate. But even that is intimacy. Even that means they recognize you as more than a machine. And other times they go silent. They meet your eyes not with rage, but with acceptance. That's the worst. The quiet ones. The ones who simply look at you like they already know how this ends. Like they forgave you before you even raised your hand. And you carry those looks with you. They settle in your bones. They echo in your steps. You remember the defiance, the pleading, the resignation. You remember the ones who smiled, who wept, who whispered names as their vision dimmed. You become the guardian of last moments, the silent witness to souls crossing the threshold. And every time you think, what do they see in me? A monster, a savior, an angel of death, or just another frightened man doing a job no one else wants? There are days when you try not to meet their eyes. You focus on the tools, on the timing, on the rhythm of procedure. But in that final second, they always find you, and the connection is made. A life ends, and yours continues, but not unchanged, because you were the last face on earth, and now they live behind yours. There are nights when the ghosts don't visit, when the rope is quiet, when the blade sleeps, and on those rare nights you dream, not of death, but of something else. A life that never happened. A life that could have happened if fate had been kinder, if the world had chosen differently. You dream of waking in a warm house with laughter echoing through the halls. A wife stirs the fire. A child pulls at your sleeve. No blood, no screams, just bread and sunlight and the weight of peace. You smell apples. You feel grass under your feet. You hear your name said with love, not fear. Sometimes you're a blacksmith, a farmer, a teacher, a father. You work with your hands and they don't tremble. You sleep with a clear heart. No one flinches when you walk past. You belong. You are whole. And then you wake. The warmth vanishes. The silence returns. The scaffold is still there, waiting. The tools glint in the corner like teeth. And the man you were in that dream dies again, just as he always does. You wonder how your life might have gone if you'd taken a different road. If you'd said no when they came knocking. If you'd run. If you'd fought. If you'd refused the hood. But that path is closed. That world belongs to someone else now. Someone softer. Someone free. Still, the dreams come. Like mercy wrapped in mist. They visit you when the weight becomes too much. They remind you that you were once human, that somewhere beneath the blood and silence and routine, a heart still beats, quietly, weakly, but still there. You never tell anyone about these dreams. Who would believe the hangman dreams of gentleness? Who would care? But you hold on to them. You build a small room inside yourself for them to live in. Because without them, you fear you might forget what hope even looks like. And if you ever disappear, If the town finds the gallows empty one morning, you hope they'll know you finally chose a different life, even if it only exists in sleep. There comes a point, slowly, imperceptibly, when the scaffold begins to feel more familiar than your own bed. You wake and don't remember your cottage. You remember the creak of timber under your boots, the chill of early morning fog curling around the post, the faint metallic scent of blood dried into the grain. The gallows becomes not just your workplace, but your ritual, your altar, your cell. You know every nail in its boards, every knot in the wood, every groove carved by the ropes and tools you've used 100 times. You know where the pigeons roost above the beam, where the wind whistles through the cracks, where the sun hits at midday and casts the longest shadow. That shadow has your shape. Sometimes you linger after the crowd has gone, not because you want to, but because you don't know where else to be. The scaffold doesn't judge you. It doesn't look away. It doesn't flinch. It holds you with a silence that feels like understanding. And in that stillness you can almost breathe. Your home? That shack on the edge of town. It feels smaller now, colder. Every corner reminds you of what you're not. You eat alone. You sleep shallow. And the walls don't speak, they accuse, with memories, with the echo of names, with a silence that demands repentance. But the gallows, it knows. It remembers with you. It doesn't ask questions. It doesn't force you to pretend. It lets you be exactly what you are, the one who ends things, the one who never starts anything, the one whose existence is a pause between another man's breath and the void. You sit sometimes on the edge of the platform, feet dangling like a child, and you think, this is it. This is where I'll be buried. Not under the earth, not in a grave with stone, but here, where the rope sways and the wind carries the last words of the forgotten. And maybe that's fitting. Maybe the gallows should be your home, because it's the only place that doesn't expect you to explain yourself. It only expects you to return, and you always do. Every job ends. Every hand grows too tired. Every blade dulls. And in quiet moments you find yourself wondering, not just when your end will come, but how they'll treat you when it does. Not as a man, but as the executioner. Will the town hold a service? Will a priest mutter a blessing over your grave? Or will they simply replace you before your body cools? Will they bury you at all? Or burn you to be sure nothing of your presence remains? You've heard the stories. Executioners dumped in unmarked graves, left to rot behind the stables, buried at crossroads with a stake through the chest, just in case. No one wants the ghost of a hangman wandering at night, looking for someone to finish the job he couldn't. Superstition is stronger than memory. You think about writing a will, but what would it say? Who would receive your tools? Your debts? Your shame? There's no one, not really. Just a house that will be torn down. A name that will be scrubbed from the ledger. A face no one wants to admit they knew. And still, the work will go on. Another man will be called. Desperate, hungry, willing. He'll pick up your axe, he'll stand where you stood, and the town will pretend nothing changed. Because it hasn't. Only the hands swinging the blade are different. The system remains the same. But you wonder, will he hear you? Will he feel your presence in the scaffold wood, in the whisper of the rope, in the weight of the hood? Will he know someone came before him, carried this curse, wore this mask? And maybe that's your only legacy. Not remembrance, but echo. You won't be missed. You won't be mourned. But you might still be felt. In the creak of a beam, in the stillness of an early morning, in the silence before the blade falls. It's not something most people think about, but you do, every day. Not as an abstract thought, but as a physical memory burned into your arms, your shoulders, your soul. You know the exact weight of a human head, not in numbers, but in sensation. You know how it tips when it's freshly severed, how it rolls unevenly, how the skin warms your hands for a few seconds before going cold. You didn't ask for this knowledge. It came the moment the first one fell. When the neck gave way and the silence hit, you looked down and saw what you had done. It wasn't just a head. It was a face, eyes still open, mouth slack. Sometimes it looked surprised, other times strangely peaceful. But it was always human. That's the part no one else sees. They think your job ends when the axe falls. That it's clean, final, distant. But the truth is, you still have to lift the head. Show it to the crowd. Display it like a trophy. That moment burns. The weight isn't just in the muscle and bone. It's in what it meant. That this person was here, breathing, thinking, and now they're not. And it was your hand that made it so. And even after the show is done, you carry it. Not just the physical act, but the knowledge. The knowledge of weight, of size, of how fragile a body really is. You know how easily flesh parts under a sharp enough edge. How fast blood leaves the neck. How still the head becomes in your grasp. Too still. There are nights you dream you're holding one again. But it's not a stranger. It's someone you once knew. A friend, a parent, a child. And when you look down in the dream, the face changes, shifting through everyone you've ever loved. You wake, not screaming, but cold. Your arms remembering a burden that's no longer there. But it feels there, because that weight, that memory, it never leaves your hands. There's no farewell for someone like you. No parade, no statue, no solemn procession. When your end comes, it's quiet, quick, and unnoticed. You simply vanish. Maybe the town clerk reports you missing. Maybe the sheriff shrugs and sends a boy to fetch another desperate soul. Maybe no one says a word at all. Just a nod, a page turned, a name crossed out. You don't get remembered. You get replaced. Your tools stay, your house stays. Even your boots might be passed on. But your story, it ends in silence. You were not a hero. You were not a villain. You were a function. A role to be filled. A shadow to be tolerated. And yet, for a brief moment, someone might wonder. They might whisper at the tavern, whatever happened to him? But it passes, because no one wants to remember the man who made them look at their own mortality, who stood between law and chaos, between justice and cruelty, between life and the grave. You might die alone, in your sleep, in the woods, in a shallow grave dug by your own hand, or worse, on the scaffold itself, accused by the very system you served. It's happened before. Executioners executed, hanged by someone newer, younger, colder. And the cycle continues. No stories will be sung, no eulogies read. But maybe, just maybe, in some far corner of a ledger, your name will remain. Faded, misspelled, forgotten. But still there, and in the whispers of the rope, in the cracks of the gallows, in the silence between the swing and the scream, you remain too. Not as a hero, but as a memory the town doesn't want, yet can never quite bury. When your final breath comes, you already know the church bells won't ring. The priest won't speak your name. No incense, no psalms, no procession winding down the aisle. They won't dress you in clean linen or place a cross over your chest. Instead, they'll bury you quietly, if they bury you at all. Your grave, if it exists, lies beyond consecrated ground. in the dirt behind the fields near the tree line, where the soil is coarse and the wind never stills. It's the same plot where they bury strangers, suicides, heretics, those considered unworthy of sacred ground. The villagers call it the edge, and that's where you go. Even in death, you don't belong. There's no marker, no stone, just packed earth. Sometimes a pile of rocks, other times not even that. The grave digger hurries through the job, muttering as he works. As if even touching your bones might taint him. Children are told not to play near that part of the woods. Animals give it a wide berth. The trees themselves seem to lean away from it. The irony isn't lost on you. You enforced the laws of the land, upheld the king's justice, delivered the peace others demanded, and yet in death, you're exiled like a traitor. Even the ones you executed will rest closer to the altar than you. Their families will leave flowers, yours will leave nothing, because there's no one left to mourn. You think sometimes about digging your own grave, not as an act of despair, but of control. To choose your final resting place before the town decides where to hide you. To make peace with the earth before it swallows you. Maybe you even picked a spot already, under a certain tree near a quiet stream where no one will find you and no one will care. Because when your name fades from the ledger and your tools rot in the shed, all that remains is a patch of dirt no one visits. A grave the rain forgets. A silence that even the crows won't break. And maybe that's fitting. You were never meant for the light, so they bury you in the shadow. Time forgets most men, especially those the world would rather not remember. And yet, the gallows, it remembers you. The wood bears your weight even after you're gone. The platform creaks in a way only your boots used to make it. The rope sways a little longer in the wind, as if it waits for your shadow to return. Long after you vanish, the scaffold still holds the shape of your presence. The notches in the rail from your hand. The small groove where your heel always pressed before the swing. A whisper in the grain. A scent that doesn't wash out. The gallows doesn't care about reputation, or sin, or what the town chooses to forget. It knows what you did. It felt every death with you. New executioners will come. Young, nervous, hungry. They'll sharpen their blades on the same stone, wrap new rope through the same ring, and though they won't know your name, they'll sense something in the scaffold's silence. A heaviness, a history, a presence. The tool remembers the hand, even when the hand is dust. The gallows ages slowly. Boards replaced, ropes renewed. But the spirit of the place, the memory, lingers. And sometimes, on quiet mornings before the crowd gathers, the wood groans in a way that sounds almost like a sigh, like mourning, like regret. Some say places can't remember, that only people carry memory. But they're wrong. The gallows is alive with everything you gave it, every scream, every breath, every second before the fall. And in its silence, it keeps you alive in the only way that matters. Not as a man, but as a function. You were forgotten by the world, but not by the thing that knew you best. The town may rebuild, the church may bless, but the gallows, it will never forget. When you die, there will be no tales told in your honor, no songs sung in your memory, no lines of text carved into stone. Your story won't be passed from father to son or recorded in any noble chronicle. Your legacy will be what you left behind. Silence. Heavy, persistent, and absolute. The town doesn't speak of you, not out of hatred, but out of necessity. To speak your name is to remember what you were, what you did for them, what they allowed to exist so they could sleep peacefully in their beds. You are the price they paid for their version of order, and remembering that would make them complicit. So they simply don't. They don't teach your name in the village school. Children grow up never knowing who swung the axe or tied the knot that day the thief or heretic was hanged. Your face fades from memory. Your house is reclaimed by weeds and silence. Someone else builds over your grave, never knowing who lies beneath. But the silence isn't forgetfulness. It's avoidance. It's the sound of an entire village collectively refusing to confront the cost of their own peace. And in that silence, your legacy persists. Unspoken, yes, but always there. In the pause before a sentence is read, in the hush that falls when the new hangman walks through the square, in the way people glance at the scaffold but never speak of it. You become a ghost, not in form, but in function. A presence felt but not acknowledged, a wound never lanced, a truth wrapped in layers of ritual and denial. But sometimes, a whisper survives. A child hears your story in secret. A traveler asks about the hooded figure who used to live beyond the last lantern. An old man drinks too much and mutters your name before falling silent again. Small moments, fragile threads. But they exist, and they hold your shape. Your legacy is silence. But silence speaks louder than history. It lingers, it accuses, and it never truly ends. In the end, you were the hand that carried out the law, but you were never treated as part of it. You were the blade of justice, sharp, necessary, feared, but you lived in the shadows like something barely human. You wore the mask not just on the scaffold, but in your life. You became the thing people needed, but never wanted to see. You existed between worlds. Not holy enough for the church, not wicked enough for the gibbet. You held the power to end lives, yet none to shape your own. Everything about you was contradiction. Feared, but required. Avoided, but summoned. Known by everyone, yet spoken of by no one. You walked through the world like a ghost, always present, never embraced. Your life was not your own. It belonged to duty, to ritual, to fear. Every choice you made was shaped by a job you could never fully leave behind. Even your silence spoke for you, because every word, every action, every breath had to be weighed against the burden you carried. You knew the weight of guilt, of bodies, of being needed only when something terrible had to be done. And now that it's over, no one knows what to do with your memory. You don't fit in the stories of heroes. You don't belong in the myths of saints. You're too real for legend, too necessary for erasure. So they settle for forgetting, but forgetting isn't absence. It's avoidance. And even ghosts leave footprints. You may not be remembered by name, but every gallows that still stands, every rope that's measured with care, every hood that's passed from one silent man to the next, that is your echo. You were the blade of justice, but you lived like a ghost, and maybe that's what justice demands.